Any other questions? There's a question in the front row. Hold on, I'm coming. What's your name? Simon. Hold on, the microphone's coming, Simon. Any minute. What year did you go to university?
Early 80s.
Early 80s. Simon, I'm passing you the mic.
I don't believe that. Liar.
His friends are laughing and saying he did not go in the early 80s. He went in the late 60s. Okay, may have been. He can't remember.
Late 70s it was. First year halls of residence and then moved out for the same reasons that you guys have discussed or described. You said about the abatement of international students. It's not abating. I don't know whether you've read the press over the last few days, indeed at the weekend. The government is restricting applications for international students. Paul here works on the immigration side on a totally different thing, but it's certainly of concern to a couple of my clients who run international language schools. And they've had their applicants reduced by 35% thereabouts. They've all applied, they've all been successful initially, even with money lodged in the UK bank account to fund the duration, only to find at the last minute it's been withdrawn. You can't come in. Certain countries are involved, particularly. They seem to have selected. But I mean, that to me is a concern looking forward, whether it's terrorism or not.
I think that's...
Shocking turn of events. The government's clamping down on your investment. How are we going to work our way out of this one?
Well, I think what's happened is the government eased its, how easy it was to come in as a student when perhaps you weren't a student. And the rules have clearly changed. I mean, now it is a paper document, and immigration officers really cannot question that student coming into the country. So I think there's been quite a lot of abuse of people coming in, not through the fault of the immigration office, but perhaps the fault of pretty lax rules. Those rules have got to be tightened first so that we then have the student population that are coming in for genuine reasons coming in. So I think that I hear where you're coming from.
So you're saying if a student is taken to Nottingham University, Tim, that will be approved, but if they're going to Dodgy Dodgerson's so-called English language school on the Harrow Road, but really actually they're not going to do anything of the sort, that may be looked into. Not saying your friends' schools are dodgy at all. I'm sure they're not.
I don't think it's so much whether it's a language school or not. I think it's a question whether they are genuinely coming to study or
There's
not.
There's definitely a language school in my street. There's not a language school. I think it's a drug den.
It's a big loophole.
Yeah, it's true.
Sorry, which street is that?
It's Pratt Street. Any other questions? Questions at all for whether or not this is going to be a worthwhile investment? Yes, sir. Ooh, what's your name? Simon. Another Simon.
To what extent do you think the overseas students that we were just talking about rely on the normal student accommodation, or do you think they tend to filter into the private rented sector? We rent a large portfolio of good quality private rented apartments, and we let a huge amount to overseas sponsored students who seem to shy away from typical traditional modern student accommodation. Maybe they have a larger budget and maybe they prefer something more modern and more exclusive in keeping with sort of city living rather than student accommodation. And I wonder if you've got any thoughts on where those guys would typically end up in terms of what they're renting.
Sure, I think there's two good people to answer this. Let's start with you, Richard, on this one.
We have a similar portfolio in London, and we certainly found that most foreign students love the type of property that we've got. So it is definitely something that we found as well. So in individual properties that we've refurbished to a high standard, often the students will pay their rent 6 or 12 months in advance, so it's very low risk. And yeah, I mean, they do like individual properties. We don't operate blocks, so I couldn't really comment on that. But
Eri, obviously, because you see the trends here.
Yeah, we do have a very large number of blocks. We have blocks that range from sort of quite cheap rents at about £60 a room a week, you know, to blocks that are £15,000 a year for a room. And £15,000 a year is a lot for a room. A very large proportion of our students, and in London, a majority of our students are from overseas. I think the key point is that people from overseas are making a purchase decision on limited information. So they will go with somebody they can trust. So if you've built up a nice portfolio, you can market it well, it's well known, and people from overseas can trust it, then fine. When they come to a block or a large manager like us, we can make it as tangible as possible, they can see the quality, then again it gives them trust, and they're less reluctant to send a year's rent in advance. You know? It's going to be very hard for them to send a year's rent to an individual owner-manager.